Yo, what's up everybody? Welcome back to our channel. I'm Peter.
And I'm Yin, and if you've been following our vlogs for a while, you'll probably know that we're Kiwis. We grew up in and have spent almost our entire lives in New Zealand, and for the past couple of months we've been traveling all around amazing Turkey.
We're currently in Çanakkale, and today we're about to head over to the Gallipoli Peninsula. And if you're familiar with World War I history, you'll know that Gallipoli has a special place of significance for both Aussies as well as Kiwis.
The Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, or Anzac for short, fought in the devastating Gallipoli campaign in 1915, and there was a significant loss of life. So we're going to go pay our respects, and we know that we have a bunch of New Zealand and Australian viewers, so we thought it would be nice to share this experience with you all especially too.
Yeah, so we're just about to head over to our tour company now, and then we'll kick off the day.
We've booked a guided tour for the day which focuses mostly on the Anzac involvement during Gallipoli. It was $75 per person, and that includes lunch as well as transport and an English-speaking guide. Usually you go in a small group, or otherwise if you're lucky it ends up just being you and the guide. There are also tours that run from Istanbul to Gallipoli, but that day trip is a very long day because you need to factor in the fact that it's also a 4-hour drive. It's also more expensive too. So we've opted to stay in Çanakkale just a couple of nights to make it a more relaxed journey. You can book directly at the Anzac house just behind me over there. It's conveniently located in town, otherwise you can book it online too.
On the 25th of April 1915, Australian and New Zealand forces arrived on what is now known as Anzac Cove, which is on the Gallipoli Peninsula. Over 16,000 soldiers arrived during the day. However, by evening, over 2,000 soldiers were either wounded or killed. The objective of the British forces was to force their way down the Dardanelles, which is where we're sailing on right now, in order to capture what is then known as Constantinople, which was the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Ultimately, the Gallipoli campaign was a failure for the Allied forces. However, what we commemorate today is the bravery, strength, and sacrifice of the men who fought. We just met up with our guide Hassan, and we're arrived here on the other side now, so we'll be able to go over and show you all the sights soon.
Great news, our day pretty much begins with lunch. So when our ferry landed, we were in Kilit, and then we took a car over together with our tour guide Hassan and the driver to Eceabat, which is where we are now. And the restaurant's name is Maydos. Maydos is the old Greek name for Eceabat. We're getting a set lunch meal, but we're just waiting for the food, so we thought we'd show you what the view looks like. Got a beautiful view of the Dardanelles, and it is very windy though. Can't wait for the lunch. Perfect timing, our food has just arrived and it's a 3-course meal. We've already got our soups and salad. This is a lentil soup, and we also have something that I really like, which is sama over there. Thank you. Let's have a try of the soup. That's delicious. It's hot, it's creamy, you can taste all that lentil that's been mushed up. So good. We've got here the sama. Looks like it's doused in olive oil, and it's usually a grape leaf that's got stuffed either meat or rice inside. Let's see what's in this one. Rice in that. That's delicious.
Our mains have arrived, and we've gotten some grilled chicken and kofta. Got myself a piece of chicken.
Smells so good.
It does. All right. Okay. You know what's crazy about this place? Usually when we go on these kind of tours and things, the food, I have to admit, is not the greatest, but this restaurant and this tour actually has really good food. It's incredibly tasty. The chicken is nice and juicy with a nice like charcoal flavor.
Yum. Yes, the food is delicious. Even our sides were great too.
I'm gonna go in for some of this kofta too. Oh.
Seems like a double winner.
Oh, that is so good. The kofta, super juicy, and also like the chicken, it has that nice like charred outside flavor, And this, my friends, is a nice like eggplant baba ganoush kind of a thing. Incredibly tasty. Yum. Now we've got a very interesting looking dessert right over here.
Yes.
Semolina with the ice cream on top. Interested to see how this is going to taste. Let's grab a little bit of everything. It's such an interesting texture. The semolina. That's a tongue twister. The semolina is very crumbly.
It's quite bitsy, right?
Yeah,
Semolina?
very bitsy. It's quite sweet as well. It tastes almost like you're eating a very crumbly cake with some ice cream on top. It's tasty. So I just wanted to introduce Hassan, who's our tour guide for the day, and he was just explaining how this is Brighton Beach, wasn't it?
That's right, Brighton Beach. Hello everybody. We are now actually on Z Beach according to the army maps. Z Beach refers from Gabatepe Point. You can see the promenade headland.
Yes, just there.
And around 3 miles north of where we are, there's another spot called Fisherman Hut. Later on, Z Beach was divided into 4 beaches: Brighton Beach, Anzac Cove, North Beach, and Ocean Beach. We're now at the Brighton Beach. In 1915, Brighton Beach was, you can see in the photo, we're now somewhere here. There were no trees. This headland can be seen in distance over there.
Yes, it looks so different now. There's so much greenery compared to what it used to look like in 1915. And I was just saying to Hassan before that the beach color and the beach here almost looks like New Zealand.
It does almost look like New Zealand. And what's crazy is just around here you can still see one of the pillboxes that are left over from World War II.
When you ask to an Australian or a New Zealander what happened at Anzac Cove, the most common words will be like that. Anzac Cove was the wrong beach. Turkish machine guns were already there, and landing of the Anzac Cove resulted with a bloodbath. Thousands of the Anzacs lost their life. If they land somewhere else, landing would not be that bloody. That's the common story that known by the people. But today I'm gonna tell you the story from a bit different perspective, from official perspective. Mostly I take support from official Australian history, which is written by Charles Bean. He was a war correspondent of Australian Army. First to last day he was here with the soldiers. He was sometimes visiting the headquarters. So I can say he knew the story much more than any other soldiers. Okay, we are now at Anzac Cove. Of course, it is not same as in 1915. There's a lot of change happened. Later on with the photos I will tell you the exact changes. On April 25 morning, on top of the Arıburnu cliff, there were only 80 Turkish observers, 80. There were no machine guns, no barbed wires, no landmines, nothing here, because Turks have no expectation of having any landing in this spot. In 1915, as there was no road here, the Arıburnu knoll was a bit more bigger, longer than what it is today. You can see today they cut the front part for the road. That's the distance the soldiers transported to the shore with the boats. These boats made a couple of trips actually, came shore of the soldiers back to ships, bring the next one. It says 2 hours after the landing, around 6:30 a.m. actually. Landing still continue. You can see no dead bodies on the beach. Soldiers' guns are at their back. They relaxed walking in the beach. There's a Turkish prisoner. The empty boats, and they are going to take the next party. You can't see any bloodbath in the photos taken in the morning. This is 8 a.m. in the morning. Officers right where we are, watching their men's safe landing. I can say nothing serious happened on the beach, but I can't say the same thing for the ones who climb on the hills. We now somewhere here. So the Turkish outpost was on top of this hill. There were 80 Turks on the first morning on top of this called Plagus Plateau. So half an hour after the landings here and here, Anzacs reached on and captured this plateau. Yes. Normally they're hoping to jump on the next ridge through the Çanakkale hill, but they had a big surprise. It's called Razor Edge. It's a very tiny bridge. I can say 100 meters wide, 100 meters long. Anzacs couldn't cross this one to the next one. It's impassable. Because they couldn't jump in the next hill, they went into gully. In this gully, they had to find alternative routes. So if they managed to cross this ridge, Razor Edge, they can easily capture Çanakkale on the first day. While there are not many soldiers died during the landings, why people believe there was a bloodbath in the coast, it has an answer, of course. After Turkish counterattack started, the fighting concentrated on second ridge and the casualties carried to the beach. But the problem, the beach was safe, but the ships were not. Because they didn't land it as in order, they missed the chance of find Turkish cannons and silence them. Turkish cannons now bombarding this coast. Even the hospital ships, hospital boats used to carry fresh ones to the shore, rather than take the wounded from beach to the ships. So every passing moment, while the numbers of the wounded increased here, and the new landers in the afternoon keep witnessed the growing number of the deaths or the wounded on the beach. Of course, later on, they report what they saw in the coast. Let me show you an afternoon photo, almost same angle. You can see this cliff, Arabunu. So you can see wounded lying in the beach and the medicals trying to help them. And by the way, the landings still continue. So the morning landers' experience and the afternoon landers' experience quite different. By looking at these photos and reports, of course, storyboard, there was a bloodbath on the beach, but you can be sure there was no bloodbath in the coast.
Mustafa Kemal was the commander of the 19th Division, and he later on became known as the founder and father of modern-day Turkey. And here are some very famous words here, which I'll read now. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets. To us, where they lie side by side, here in this country of ours. You the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Ataturk, 1934. It actually sent me a couple of chills just reading that out loud, and just being here and seeing all this for myself. It's a really special
moving experience,
especially for us being Kiwis as well. Besides from these monuments that you see to commemorate New Zealand and Australian fallen soldiers here in Turkey, you can also see back home in New Zealand and as well as Australia monuments to commemorate Ataturk. Photo, we can see that this is the beach that the New Zealanders landed. This is a hospital, and the dead were pulled by horse carriage over to the cemetery that we just passed. This is the Sphinx, which you can still see to this day up here.
Specific spot here in North Beach is actually where the dawn service is held every year at 25th April to commemorate all the Anzac soldiers. What we can see in front of us is the Sphinx that Peter pointed out earlier, and it was named that because there were a lot of troops that were trained over in Egypt, and of course there's the Sphinx there, so they carried that name over to here. There was 130,000 soldiers that fell during the Gallipoli campaign, of which around 87,000 of them were Ottoman soldiers, about 44,000 of them were the Allied soldiers, and of the Allied soldiers, 8,700 around about were Australians, and another 2,700 or so soldiers were New Zealanders. It's some staggering numbers, and it's just such a huge sacrifice that all these men gave their lives to.
Where we are right now is a place of significance called Lone Pine, which is symbolized by the lone pine tree that stands in this cemetery. And the reason why this area is significant is because it has a lot of Australian and New Zealand names that have been commemorated in this area because their exact graves are in an unknown place. So along here you see a lot of Australian graves as well as a lot of Australian names that are on that wall back over there. And on the cross monument, which is over off in the distance, you'll see New Zealand names on both sides, the left and the right sides.
In 1914, there was a popular American song called On the Trail of Lonesome Pine. When Anzac soldiers came up this far, on that ridge, there was a pine tree standing, similar to this. Seeing the tree, remembering the song, shorten its name as Lone Pine and give it to the area. So since then we call this area as Lone Pine. But during the battle at Lone Pine, this tree was destroyed. And the Anzacs found the seeds of this tree, sent it to Australia. In 1915, a tree was planted with the seed come from Gallipoli. Then in 1950s, they sent another seed from Australia to Turkey, and we plant this tree on the middle of the cemetery. Another seed came to Gallipoli in 1990 from Australia, and we plant this tree here. So these are being the relatives of the original tree.
Something really interesting that we learned from Hassan when we were in the car just before is that Hassan actually has a Facebook page called There Is Someone at Gallipoli, and he does this incredibly beautiful and kind thing, which is that people can get in contact with him and he will look up the registry of the relatives that may have passed away during their time here in Gallipoli, and he will go and specifically search out where the grave is and to connect the two families together, which I think is just exceptionally kind and generous of you, Hassan.
It's a pleasure. So when you have a relative who died at Gallipoli, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. I can find their graves, take photos for you and send these photos for you.
Yes.
There is someone at Gallipoli.
We'll put the link inside the description details below of the video too.
The youngest Anzac soldier to die during the Gallipoli battle at age 14. Rest in peace. Where I am right now is where the front lines of the battle would have been, and Australian and New Zealand troops would have been dug out in the trenches right over there, and you can still see some of the remnants of the trenches now. They would have been 2 meters tall back in those days, and the Turkish soldiers would have been camped over there. It's only 7 or 8 meters distance apart. And right here lies one of the most memorable stories that I remember that teachers would tell me even when I was a child back home in New Zealand going to school. And that is on the 24th of May 1915. There was an armistice between the New Zealand, Australian as well as the Turkish soldiers because during that time 40,000 Turkish troops actually stormed this front. They were all relatively new troops, never fired a gun before this moment except for training of course, and a lot of them were actually ran right into gunfire, and this entire area, which is called no man's land, the area between the Anzac as well as the Turkish soldiers, was piled high with dead bodies. They were all decomposing in the sun, and it actually attracted millions of flies and was becoming a bit of a health risk with airborne disease. And so for that one day, the soldiers laid down their arms and agreed to clear and bury some of the dead bodies that were lying in this area. During that time, New Zealand, Australian as well as the Turkish soldiers actually met and exchanged chocolates as well as cigarettes. And there is one of the most original cemeteries that's just right over there. A lot of it was actually built during that day of the armistice.
Yes, that's something that's very uncommon to find, cemeteries on the actual front line itself.
Yeah.
The bodies were said to have smelt so bad.
Yeah, that's right. The bodies were said to have smelt so bad that even the naval ships that were parked way out in the water were able to smell it, as well as a local island nearby. So just imagine the horrific conditions that all these soldiers would have had to be going through during that time.
Yes, it's so sad, but imagine fighting one day, getting to know the people that you're fighting against the next, and then
having to fight again the day after.
Yeah.
It's just
heartbreaking.
surreal. We've made our way over to the neck, and this spot was going to be part of a multi-coordinated attack from the Allies. The New Zealand forces were meant to have gone along the beach and towards inland toward Çanakkale. The British forces were actually going to provide the Australian forces, which were positioned here right on the neck, some support as the Australian forces charged towards the Turkish lines in multiple waves. However, it somehow fell apart and the coordination wasn't quite there, and after 2 Australian waves of soldiers charged the Turkish lines and were completely mowed down, the commanding officer at the time went to his superior and said, something's not quite right here. Our forces are just being mowed down. We should probably stop. However, this commanding officer said, push on ahead. And so unfortunately, the continual 3rd and 4th waves of the Australian forces charged on, mostly to their deaths as well. So it's part of a very sad piece of history here for the Australian soldiers. During the multi-force attack, New Zealand soldiers were able to make their way inland and capture Çanakkale Hill, which is where we're standing right now. And in fact, right behind us is the New Zealand Memorial, which you can see a lot of the names of the fallen soldiers. It sits underneath the Atatürk Memorial, which is just on top of that hill.
Over that way.
Yeah, and Atatürk was actually able to unite the Axis powers and drive the Allied forces back over to the coastline right behind us down there. And after 9 months of a hard slog of fighting, eventually they needed to call it quits and retreat and evacuate all the men from the Gallipoli Peninsula. For Yen and I, it has been amazing to able to see the Gallipoli campaign and also this entire peninsula area. It's been something that we've been hearing a lot about in schools as we were growing up, but to be able to see it ourselves in person, it has been incredible.
It has really, and it's been really wonderful having our tour guide Hassan, who's been exceptionally knowledgeable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Alright guys, so we're going to wrap things up here.
A bit of a somber vlog this one, but one that we felt was really important and that we wanted to share. It's kind of hard to reconcile just how beautiful and peaceful and well maintained that place is when you know the devastating and tragic loss of life and history behind Gallipoli.
Yeah, we do want to give a special thank you to everyone at Hassle Free Travel, and especially to our guide Hassan. You've been amazing. You've been a wealth of knowledge.
Yes, you can just see the passion that Hassan has and the respect as well for the Anzac troops and all the soldiers that fought in this tragic war, but he just did so much research. It was incredibly thorough, and yes, we learned a lot ourselves too.
Yeah, so this is going to actually be one of the last videos that we make from here in Turkey. We've just got another short stop in Istanbul before we fly back home to New Zealand for our very good friend's wedding.
Yes, it's going to be almost, well actually exactly 3 months pretty much that we would have spent our time in Turkey by the time we wrap everything up. So we hope we'll see you in our last couple of vlogs.
See everybody.